Alright guys, so it is project time. Now that convention season is over for me, as well as the Olympics, everything will get shut down in the summertime for those two reasons, because yeah, that's pretty big for the summer. Convention, Olympics, yeah, so now that all that's over, I'm getting back to working on the apartment. The next project, as you can see, is my weathered wood TV stand that I'm building from scratch. From Menards, I bought this Mastercraft Edge Loop pine board. It's a nominal board that is 16 by 36 inches wide. And I bought 3 of these boards. I'm actually going to make it stand 3 feet tall off of the floor, plus the 1 inch, because this will be on the top part. But this is going to be the top shelf, a middle shelf to hold a basket, which the basket is over here, and then a bottom shelf for my little cutesy stuff. These are poplar dowels, and they are 2 inches by 2 inches and then 36 inches long. So again, these legs will be 3 feet off of the floor, and I'm going to be joining those onto the boards here to hold my television. I'm going to be doing a couple of different special techniques on the wood to make it my own custom type thing. I came across some okay pieces of furniture that I would have liked for my TV stand, but it would be like one feature I liked here or one feature I liked on something different, and I wanted to just go ahead and just make it the way I wanted it, instead of, yes, I like the way this is finished, but I don't like the design of it, or I like the design, but that finish is not quite what I'm looking for. Because as you guys know, I'm going with a nautical theme for the living room. I currently already have 2 large cubicle storage systems in my living room that weathered driftwood look, and 2 end tables that are driftwood. So I want this also to be driftwood look, and I could not find a TV stand that I liked with the driftwood finish, and also I could not find one that was big enough to hold my television. So I'm just going to make it from scratch. Why not? So a couple of different techniques that I'm going to be using with this, I saw on Property Brothers, where they use a torch to burn the wood, and what that does is it makes the grain pop out more, so that when you stain it, you'll see more of how the grain naturally is in the wood. So I have a torch for that. Yes, y'all, it's getting dangerous. Then I will be staining with Rust-Oleum's wood stain. I bought this at Michael's, and it is a weathered gray. Got 2 cans of that, but I only think I'm going to need 1. Then I'm going to give it a little bit of a more weathered look with a chalk paint, and this color is Cocoon. So it's kind of like a ecru taupe-ish cream. And then, of course, I've got my chip brushes, which are the cheap brushes that you can use when you're doing staining or painting that you can just throw away. Very important. And last but not least, in order to join all the pieces of wood together to make the furnished product, from Harbor Freight, I bought this Drill Master portable pocket hole jig kit. This runs about $60 at Harbor Freight, and I can't tell you what it does because I've never used one before, so we're gonna learn this together, okay? All I know is that it helps to join joints of wood together, but it does it in a way so that you don't see it from the outside of the furnished piece. All the holes and screws will be hidden from underneath and out of sight and out of view. So we're gonna learn how to use this together. Thankfully, I've got some pieces of wood that I can test it on first before I get to my actual wood for the furnishing. So yeah, I'm gonna make sure that I do a little bit of testing first so that I actually know how to use this before I go through with it. So what you're gonna see me do next is I'm going to go outside and I'm going to unwrap these pieces of pine and I'm going to burn them with my torch. Alright, so if y'all want to see me get dangerous, just hang around. So when you're selecting boards to do a project like this, you definitely want to check to make sure that the integrity of the board is there. I just opened up the package on this board and I noticed that there is a hairline crack here in it. You can, I'm trying to get my camera focus here, sorry. There's a hairline crack in it here. And it's possible that over time it will give away. But I'm going to go ahead and use this board because I am going to be using one of the shelves as just a decorator shelf. But definitely when you find these boards at the hardware store, make sure that you check and make sure that they're not cracked, not even have any hairline cracks. And you want to try and find boards that don't have these little sap pockets because those are kind of like full of syrup. So these boards didn't cost very much. Maybe in a couple of years I'll have to do this project over again if it starts to fail. But for right now it will do okay because my television isn't very heavy. It's like 20 pounds or 25 pounds heavy. So it's not very heavy. I don't foresee a problem happening in the near future. But again, you want to look for boards that don't have these pitch pockets, that have the sap in them from the pine trees. And you want to check for the structural integrity to make sure that there are no hairline cracks, especially when they are edge glued boards, because they're really strips of wood that are glued together on the short side. It's not one piece of wood, it's several pieces of wood. So also when you decide which side that you're going to burn with your propane torch, look for which side that already has a really neat pattern on the grain before you start burning, because I'm only going to be burning on one side of each board because that's all you're going to see is just one side. The side that'll be facing downward to the floor, I'm not going to be burning. So on this particular board, I like this side of the grain, so I'm going to begin burning that part of the board. As you can see, I've already burned one that was my test board. And it kind of looks a little spotty, but again, this was my first time using the propane torch, and this board will probably go on the bottom shelf. But once we get the stain on it, we may not even be able to see that it's kind of splotchy. If you are using a propane torch for the first time, especially one of these that don't have a self-starter, they just have this little nozzle here. I'm going to show you how to start lighting it because it's difficult to do. On the instructions it says to use a match. A match was not successful for me, so I ended up using a butane lighter. Also, very, very important, when you're working with dangerous materials and chemicals, you make sure that you have a fire extinguisher handy. And don't put it in the way of something that's going to catch on fire. Put it very near to you and read the instructions first before there's a fire. Now, unfortunately, I'm having to start my lighter over several times because I always seem to have pick days for projects that I need outside for when it's super, super windy. And as you can see, my phone is bobbling back and forth. It's super, super windy out. So I do have to start my lighter quite several times throughout the project to keep burning the wood. So this is how you light it. Keep your torch either turned off or turn it on just slightly. You'll hear hissing. And then take your lighter and put it right underneath of the front. And then you'll begin to hear it burning. In order to get this to burn onto your material in a horizontal fashion like this, you have to let this set up for 2 minutes. So once you get the flame actually lit and burning, you need to let it set for 2 minutes. Then you'll be able to use it horizontally or upside down. If you're going to be using it vertically, then you don't have to worry about that. But if you're going to be turning it at all, you're going to need to let it set up for 2 minutes first. So you guys know the first rule to any type of staining or painting raw wood, you've got to sand it down. Yes, even after I burned it, it still needs to be sanded down to get all that carbon off of it so that it will be prepared for receiving the stain and paint. Also, make sure that you wipe it down really good and get all the debris, grit, sawdust off. This is the second time that I've worked with a Rust-Oleum stain for raw wood, and I obviously forgot the first time that I used it how this stuff works. I guess from being a beginner's point of view, I'm thinking that a stain works quite differently than this, but even though it's not what I expected, it turned out really, really beautiful. So this gray almost looks like the primer that I used in the bathroom before I put the epoxy resin down. It's really, really heavy, and you don't need to use a whole lot in order for it to do its job. Which is why you can see I'm not painting it over every single square inch of this board. In a few seconds here, you'll see why. But literally, I am just gently brushing it on, not very heavy at all. I'm not going to need that much anyway because it's going to be covered. Then taking a rag, I'm going to rub the stain into the board as much as possible. On the actual can, it says to let it sit for 1 to 2 minutes and then rub it in. Because this stuff is so potent, I don't let it wait at all. Like, I just rub a little bit of it in and then try and rub off the excess. And it came out this beautiful blue grayish color, which I wasn't going for that. I actually looked at the first board I did and I was like, I need to go make a trip to the hardware store and get a different color because I do not like this. But then I thought to myself, well, I don't know what the finished product is looking like, and if it turns out bad, really bad, I will just sand this down and start from scratch. Well, I'm glad that I stuck with this bluish gray color because it turned out so pretty. But again, you just want to take an old rag and rub it in really, really good. And if you want your stain to be heavier, then you can go crazy with it and paint the entire square footage of your board or your piece of wood and then let it sit for 1 to 2 minutes and then rub the stain in, or you can go as light as you want to. This is, I would say, a light to medium weight stain, and as you can see, the other side is where the wood was burned, but the side that I was just working on was the side that was not burned. So yeah, that's what the Rust-Oleum stain looks like. This folk art paint and wax brush set, as well as the Art Minds chalk paint that I'm using for this next part of the project, were both available at Joann Fabrics. And again, the color of it is called Cocoon, so it's kind of like a light ecru. And I am basically just painting it on. Because this is going to be distressed, depending on your level of distressing, is really how much you're going to either paint this on or not paint it on. I did it pretty heavy in some areas and then lighter in other areas because I knew that I was going to be using a sand block in order to remove some of it. But if you don't want to sand anything, you can actually get the distressed look from using these brushes and just lighter strokes. And you don't want to use such a uniform fashion when you're painting it on, like up and down against the grain. If you want to go diagonally or horizontally, it'll help to give that effect of having texture and distressing and weathered look to it. So you don't necessarily have to sand it at all if you don't want to. There's also a technique known as wet sanding, which I am not going to be doing on this video, that you can use as well. So in place of using a sanding block, you wait until the paint is almost dry and then you use a sponge and then you basically just wipe it off. But I like the sanding technique because that's the tools that I have, and I really wanted it to look very distressed by exposing not only the stained wood underneath, but the actual real color of the pine raw as well. So like I said, you can go as heavy or as light as you want to with this. And as you can see, I'm not painting the entire square footage of the board, and you can leave it just like that, and that will give it a distressed look as well. This part of the project was probably the most easy and the most relaxing part. You can layer as many different types of chalk paint as you want to, and then you can distress them, and you can see so many colors come through. So it's not just limited to making something look weathered and old. If you want something to look more modern, and you want to use greens and pinks and yellows and blues, do that. I don't have enough space in my apartment for all the furniture that I would like to make, but yeah, distressing stuff is so easy. It's a lot easier than probably most people think. And you can do it on smaller projects. It doesn't have to be on a TV stand. You can do it on pots or planters or knickknacks, small wooden objects around your home. So yeah, that's it. It's pretty easy. So this next part of the project actually showed me how out of shape I am. My right arm is killing me, y'all, after doing this. So this is actually the part of distressing the wood. So using a rubber sanding block, I use a sheet of sandpaper and attach it to the block. I am just taking off as much chalk paint as I want to. You want to focus on the corners and edges of your project to show distress, as well as I'm focusing on areas where I did not put the chalk paint on top of the stain heavily, so that I can actually see more of that stain come through. This part of the project is easy. The wet sanding, like I told you before, with wiping it off with a wet sponge before it's completely dry, is a lot less physical, and it takes less energy to do. If you don't have a lot of arm power or strength or energy, you might want to go the wet sanding route. Otherwise, be prepared to be sore if you have not been working out. You could probably also use a hand sander as well. Just make sure that you don't hold it in one spot for too long. Otherwise, you're going to take off way more paint and stain than you probably want. But don't just move in one direction. Go in all different types of directions, diagonal, and gouge out some spots to make it look real. Initially, when I began to apply this product, I was not too impressed. I wasn't sure what the wax was supposed to do, and I really wish that I had just used my Rust-Oleum polyurethane sealer instead. But the finished project I do like. I could do with or without this in the future, but since I have it, I might as well use it. Once I actually buff the wax, what it does for this project in particular is any little bit of grain that might have been rough or raw still sticking up through the stain and chalk paint was actually smoothed over with the wax. For me, it didn't leave much of a sheen or shine, but it will protect the stain and the chalk paint. So I do like it. The legs that are going to be attached to the TV stand are 2 by 2 inches. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark that on 2 boards, 4 of the corners. Because remember, the third board is going to go on top of the legs. And I'm going to use my square to make sure that they are perfect 2-inch squares. Using a reduced shank plunge cut attachment on my multifunction tool, I'm going about halfway to about 3/4 of the way down through the wood before I take it in, plunge it sideways, and try and cut off as much as possible. The next thing I'm going to do is use a hand saw to go ahead and release the rest of the square from what I've cut so far, making sure not to go too deep into cutting it because I don't want to damage the board any further than the 2 by 2 inches that I've already measured. Then, to get rid of any unwanted little pieces of wood, I'm just going to use my sanding block to go in and kind of smooth out the area that I just cut off. It'll make it much easier for the legs to go in flush. Okay, so this pocket hole jig is so stinking easy to use, it's ridiculous. I watched a lady on a YouTube channel called Jane Drill, and she explained everything I needed to know, and it was super simple. There was really no setup. You basically just put the wood on top of the jig, and you drill depending on how deep the wood is in either that first hole or the second hole, and it just makes the pocket hole for you. Like, I can't tell you how easy it is. You just got to go to her website, Jane Drill. She will teach you everything about woodworking. And of course, I'm going to repeat the process on the legs as well, but on 2 sides of the legs. I only did 1 pocket hole per corner on the boards, but 2 pocket holes per leg because I wanted them to be secure. So I chose to attach the legs to the board starting with the top board to give some type of stability and structure so that when I attach the middle and bottom board, they will already be in place. Yeah, I didn't really have like a written out plan for this. This is all in my head, you guys. So I went ahead and drilled the 2 pocket holes into the top board on the inside part of each 4 legs, and all except for 1 leg came out really sturdy, but I'm not really worried about it. They are pretty sturdy for a homemade project. Then the next board that I attached was the bottom board. Again, I only drilled 1 pocket hole per board for each corner on the bottom and middle boards, and they're pretty stable and sturdy. I'm not going to foresee having any problems in the future with this TV stand lasting for a while. Then finally, I attached the middle board because the top and bottom board gave me perfect stability and measurement to make sure that the middle board would be in just perfectly. I'm using a short piece of wood that I measured the basket with, giving it 1 inch of clearance once it sits inside of the TV stand, to make sure that when I drilled that middle board into the leg, that it was going to be a perfect measurement for all 4 legs. So yeah, that little piece of wood measures about 7 inches. So I just moved it from section to section as a guide to keep that board straight and level. Then I just flipped over the TV stand and finished the other side with that little piece of wood, making sure that it was the same measurement on both sides. Because I wanted this, even though it is a homemade project, I wanted it to look professional and well done. I don't want it to look like it was made at home. So yeah, this was a really fun project to do. Like I said, I didn't write anything out, I didn't draw anything. I just had an idea in my head and I just ran with it. So even if you do not know anything about woodworking, go pick up a couple books from the library, look at some YouTube videos. You too can have a custom TV stand.